Hi, I'm Alison and welcome to the China Repair Studio. And so today I thought I would fill in the rest of the Staffordshire dogs. Now in my previous video I did actually glue them back together again using some Araldite glue with titanium dioxide, and now they're dried I'm ready to fill in and also make an extra part on here. But before I do, if you haven't subscribed before, please subscribe, please like, and also please share. Right, so let's get cracking. So I'm going to use Milliput, and I use the super fine white. It tends to be my go-to, to be honest. They do various other colours, but I tend to use mainly the super fine white. Now, what I'm going to do first, I think I'm just going to show you how I would fill in these little bits here, as you can see, all the cracks. And then after that, we're going to make a leg here, ready for him. Now these are quite tricky. This one here isn't so bad, as you can see. It's just a bit along here. Right, so what I'm going to do is show you how to fill this in. So first things first, you need to get your Milliput. It comes in two parts and you mix half and half. And you combine it thoroughly together. And then once you've done that, you can start to use it. Now you don't tend to need very much. Probably start off with actually because we're doing the leg, we probably will need more actually. If it was just cracks, it wouldn't be so much. So I'd probably actually use something like, it's probably quite a lot. I tend to put it in a ball so you can see the size. So that's one there. And then let's get to the other. So there, let's put him up there so you can see him a bit. So if you can get it into another ball shape. A little bit more. I always find the blue one always seems to be slightly harder. Now that's looking about right, because if you put them into balls you can tell if they're roughly the same size, which is quite good. Once you have used the Milliput, always make sure that you put it and wrap it up straight back into its little bag. Otherwise it may just start to sort of dry out, particularly around the edges. So put that away. Right, so while that's in, put that there. We will then start to mix and combine the Milliput. Now, when you are filling in cracks and making new body parts on various sculptures and figurines, another thing I would highly recommend is to just get, if you can get hold of a tool like this, they're very useful because you can scrape on. If you don't, you could use a cocktail stick. They do tend to break slightly, but it is actually, that would be quite good to sort of get into all the little, as I say, the nooks and crevices, if you like. I do have another implement here. So I could use the sharp end just on there. And it also has a flat end here, which is actually very useful. So we're mixing well. It takes a couple of minutes to mix it thoroughly. Right, you can see it's getting there, and once it's thoroughly mixed in, it tends to almost feel like blue tack, quite soft. You don't want it hard. You want it to be quite pliable, so you can sort of mould it quite easily and sort of squeeze it into where it needs to be. So it's almost there. Now Milliput does come in lots of various colours. And I have been very kindly sent a box from Milliput with the different colour tones they do. So this is a super fine white, for instance, and I'll just show you the colours that they come in. Now, they also come in a silver grey and a black. So if you've got an item which is black or a different colour, instead of using white, you can use the Milliput in those colours, and it makes life so much easier. The other three colours it comes in a terracotta, and also the standard white again. Again, I tend to use the super fine white when I'm doing this kind of work. And they've just brought out a new colour, which is a turquoise blue, which is quite exciting. I would like to see how that works on Chinese, because Chinese items tend to have a bluey tone. So hopefully that would be better than using white. Now, I haven't been sponsored by Milliput at all, but I thought I would just show you the different types of colours they do, as I say, because they did kindly send me some. Right, now we're nice and combined there. It's literally, it feels like blue tack, it's all nice and pliable. So we're going to start filling in. Right, I think what I'll do, I'll just start here on the neck, and then last we will just make a little part here. Right, so what I tend to do is to break a bit off. Another thing you'll need, it's quite useful, is to just get a small cup of water and some kitchen roll, just to sort of wipe the hands. Now, do make sure your hands are really clean, because you don't want to be getting any dirt into the Milliput or even into the crevices, otherwise it's going to be harder to paint. If you hear a dog in the background, she's hungry. Right, so can you see here we've got little parts here just missing. So if I start to move them that way, you can see. So we just fill them in like that. And I use this end, the blunt end, on this little implement. It's very useful. You could use a small palette knife if you like, and then you just very carefully just fill it in there. You want it slightly proud. You don't want it to be too flush, otherwise there'll be no adjustment and room for when you sand. So if you can just be slightly proud, that would be great. And then I can see the cracks here, so they're kind of easy. You can just, as I say, use one of these implements, but if you don't, a palette knife or a cocktail stick, and if you can just gently go round there like that, just push the Milliput into the cracks. You want it completely filled in. Now, years ago, when I first started, when I was first introduced to China restoration, it was by a lovely old lady. She must have been in her 80s, and she'd been doing China restoration for years. And of course, in her day, there never used to be anything such as Milliput. And what the old China restorers used to do, they would mix glue, they would get glue and they would put it into the hands all sticky, and they'd wait until it gets a bit tacky, and then they would actually put in talcum powder with it. And that makes it actually very fine, almost translucent, a bit cloudy. But it was such a laborious process, I can't tell you. You'd be there for what seemed like hours mixing glue and talcum powder just so you could fill in your items, whereas the Milliput, I've got to say, is so much easier. Now, please put them in the comment box below, and I do try to answer your questions as best as I can. Now, that's literally there. I want to be quite gentle on this actually, because I can see sort of a hairline crack from where he's been damaged, but it hasn't actually come away. But just here I can see, I think you can see there's a small hairline crack, and I don't want to sort of agitate that. And then I'll just do this part here. Now, once I've done this, I'll show you how I would actually do a leg, and then I can go back to him. So once we, once we have actually, as you can see, filled in the little cracks, it's actually quite a good idea to just apply a little bit of water, because that just softens the milliput slightly and just blends it right in, and then that's easier when it comes to actual sanding down. You don't have any rough bits. So with your water, just dip your finger in and then just rub it down slightly. And just rub it in, just to make it nice and smooth. If you can see there. So he's now ready for just drying off, and then we can sand him. Right, what I do is I do need to do a bit above the neck, but I think what I need to do now is show you how to model and make the foot. Now it is quite simple, his foot, because obviously we've got the other pair, so we can actually see how it looks. And by looking at it, obviously you have the sort of the hind bit here, and then it goes in. So what I'll do is I'll again take the milliput. If it starts to dry out slightly, if you can just give it another little squeeze, and that will actually soften it up again. Right, so you want to take a little bit off and start getting it sort of roughly the shape and the size of the foot. It takes a bit of adjustment, but you do get there eventually. So where we are, so that's kind of looking, maybe make it a bit fatter. Right, and then what I would tend to do, let's see if I can get this lower slightly. There we go, so you can see there. So I would actually take the milliput and place it on now. I can see it needs a lot more milliput on there, so take a little bit more. It is trial and error. It does take a bit of time, especially with the parts. Right, so that's a bit thicker this time, so let's see how that is. Put that to the side. So it goes like that. Now I know I've got too much on here now. A smidge less. It's quite a funny angle because it sort of goes in. Try to shape it. Take a bit off. That's going to be slightly better. And if you can just get it to roughly the shape. That's a bit of a bow there, let's get him out. Now that's getting better. It doesn't have to be perfect because, as I say, we are going to be sanding it, but try to get it as close as you can to the actual foot and the shape and the size. So if we take a little bit more, I think we need, actually that isn't too bad. Might be one or two gaps, but we can fill those in after. I think what I'll do is just to sort of mould it to roughly the shape. So what you can do is, with my little tool here, I'm just going to dip it into the water so it's just slightly wet, and then I can just start to mould it and get some definition and shape. And it's what's useful. It does have the other foot, so we get a rough idea of how it looks and how it should be. And then just to start to mould it, as I say, we are going to be sanding it, but if you can just start to, if you can see, just getting the foot on, and then again water, and then just, doesn't matter if we've got one or two little lines, as I say, we can blend those later, and just blend it in slightly with the original part of the foot. As I say, if you don't have a tool like this, a palette knife is good, or a cocktail stick. You don't want to make the Milliput too wet. If it gets too wet, it's really quite hard. So if it gets to that stage, if you can just leave it to dry and then go back. So you can see, if you can see the back part. And then just push his leg down slightly. Start getting the shape. You know, when you are doing things like this, you don't need to panic on, you know, oh, it's not exactly right, because again, we will be sanding. But if you can get the basic shape, it makes life so much easier when it does come to sanding. So we've got a bit more there. And a bit more. Let's have a look. Good thing about this tool, because it's flat, you can get right in. So I would highly recommend, if you can get something like this, that'll be very good. Now I can see it's got a little bit there. You could do this in 2 stages, for instance. It's kind of getting its shape, and we could leave this until it dries, and then you could give it a very light sand, and then, you know, fill in a little bit more Milliput where you need it. It's not very often you get it in the first hit. So if you can just start to sculpt it and just get the rough idea of how it's going to be. Now, if you do have a very large item and a really large piece of Milliput, say you've got a cracked bowl and you're filling in a big amount, what I would highly suggest you doing first is to apply the piece with some Araldite glue, then place on the Milliput, because if it's a large piece, it may not actually hold so well. Small items like this and small crevices like this is perfect. You don't need to use glue. But if you're just doing one big crack, I would highly recommend using some Araldite slow release glue first. Definitely not to use super glue, but definitely use the Araldite. Now that's shaping quite nicely. This all goes in like that. Now I think what I'm going to do, I think I'm just going to let that just dry, and then I will apply a second coat of Araldite to it, give it a slight sand, then I will apply some more some more Milliput, just on a few little bits and pieces, and then it'll be ready for proper sand. As you can see, it's just missed a bit there. And it's all getting, I've now worked a lot of it with some water to shape it, so I really want to stop there. So I'll get onto that. So I think we just finish off this bit here, I think. So again, we can use some of that there. Now it's just if you do see a bit and it's just a small hairline crack, you can try to really make the putty quite small and almost the shape. It makes life so much easier, and then you can just gently press, and it's literally done then, and then just again press it in very carefully so it's protruding out. As you can see, it's coming along quite nicely now. And then we'll take another piece. Again, really get that nice and thin. And then we just go over. So it's around there. It's probably a bit too thick. That's it, I'll do it there. Okay, and then just press it in. Again, you could use water with it. So there we go. That's getting right into those crevices now. But I am leaving it so it's protruding slightly. There's that crevice there. You can tell by the look and the feel. I would highly recommend when you are doing any form of restoration to have good light. Right by a window is perfect. When it does start getting really quite dark, I do have a big overhead light, preferably in a blue colour tone, because ordinary artificial light's quite yellow, and if you have a yellow light and you're painting, for instance, you're not getting the true colour. So, but that'll be on another tutorial. Just see another little bit I've missed there, so you can just keep going back, making sure you've got all the bits covered. Let's put it there. There we go. Right, I think that's in quite nicely. Now, when you are using Milliput, I would say it's, as I said, I'm not sure what I said before, but it takes around, I like to give it 24 hours to really cure and harden. You don't want to be going in there too soon, otherwise it's going to start slipping and going everywhere. So it's on there. Right, and I can see we've got little bits here which needs doing. I love Staffordshire pieces. They do break very easily because the Staffordshire pottery is quite porous, and so they are quite susceptible to breakages. So I do tend to get quite a lot of Staffordshire pottery pieces in. They're English, and they were usually made by home workers, or at least painted by home workers. Victorian. I'm not sure on the age of these. I think they're about 1940s. I may be wrong. I think they're around that. Right, so we'll just finish off that little bit of leg there, and then we're done on him. And then just smooth that down, just make sure it's all in, but still protruding. Right. Yeah, I think he's looking pretty good. The foot's coming together. Now we've filled in all the cracks around his neck, ready for just curing, and then the sanding will be the next process, which will be in my next video. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to let this dry for tonight, and then tomorrow I will give it another, I'll lightly sand it and really put a bit more in. So then we've got the leg, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to finish the twin here, just where he's just got a slight crack around his head. As you can see, he's missing a few pieces there, so I'm going to fill him in as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video today. Dog here now. I hope you enjoyed this video today on how to use Milliput on any sort of structure of pottery. This also works with porcelain and also china. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. And again, comment if you want to ask any questions, and I will see you in the next